Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Mirror podcast. I'm Kyle David, your host. If you don't know, now you know. I'm back with another guest. I say that I have back with a special guest every time. That's because every time I try to bring a special guest. So today I have Chuck Whitley, somebody that I've had a conversation with prior that was introduced to me to a friend. He's just super intriguing, inspiring, and I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this conversation. So anyways, without further ado, Chuck, thanks for being here, my friend. I would love for you to just introduce yourself and kind of give us the rundown on who you are, where you came from, what you're all about before we get into it.
Well, thank you. Well, good morning, Kyle, and thank you for having me on the podcast. And Chuck Whitley with 4C Business. I'm an executive coach, but I really specialize in spiritual direction. And really with executive coaching, the key issue is driving innovation. And I argue as we deepen our relationship with Jesus, as we learn to receive from God, it's really God who drives innovation in us and through us as we are able to just identify our voice from God's voice, separate the two, work on whatever God calls us to work on to grow. And then oftentimes God will give us innovative things to not only advance our business, advance our career, but really what we're doing is we are representing God in the marketplace. And if people ask, well, why would God want to advance my career? Because he's leveraging your career for his glory. That's why. And of course, God would advance you. I got into this. I really actually just fell into this when I was a pastor doing leadership development. I found out that many of the issues in leadership development weren't necessarily issues of knowing what to do, but a lot of what was holding people back was what was going on the inside. And so all I did was pull from 2,000 years of church history in spiritual direction. I got my leaders into prayer. God began to identify issues that were blocking them, things like the simple belief that I'm not good enough. They didn't even know it, but in prayer, they became aware of just kind of what's going on inside. And as we prayed through them, people would just automatically emerge into leadership kind of spontaneously. It wasn't something I had to drive them into or teach them into. It was something God was leading them into once they identified what was going on inside of them.
And I love it. You and I had a conversation before, so I have a little more context on you than the people. But so, like you said, you were in ministry, right? You were a pastor before all this. What started pulling you? I know you mentioned leadership development some. What pulled you specifically to say, hey, I want to work with executives now based on your ministry experience?
Well, I kind of fell into it. I'll be honest with you. I was just at a church down here in San Diego, California, next to UCSD. And there was a bunch of PhDs and postdocs and executives in the church. They were friends. They were attracted to the church. I was an associate pastor there. And as I was doing leadership development work, really just trying to help them get into doing Bible studies, host a Bible study, lead a Bible study. For me, kind of a simple thing. They couldn't do it. And it was really interesting. And I'd have conversations with them. And it'd be really strange. They're PhDs, right? I know they're smart. Sure. They're running organizations. I know you could do this, but they couldn't. And as we just dug into it, they just began to grow. Now, eventually I moved on from the church, and a lot of those people would call me up and say, Chuck, can we just keep doing what we were doing? Didn't really have a name for it. They were just execs, and I need a way of growth, because not only was I helping them do ministry in the church, but it was bleeding over into their careers, and they're walking in greater confidence. A lot of times they're just like, Chuck, I just feel connected to God. Anything else is kind of a side effect. I just feel connected to God. So could we just keep this going? And actually I did it for free for years until another executive coach kind of chewed me out. Like, what are you doing? Why are you charging these people money? I'm like, I don't know. How does this work? Showed me the ropes. And a lot of those people I was working with, I just said, hey, I need a new job. I need to make more money. Can we start charging you? And they're like, okay. It was no big deal. As executive coach, there's usually a line item in their corporate budget for coaching. So they just pulled from that. A lot of times it didn't even come out of their pocket. And so it was literally something I fell into. Now, I guess that's on the natural side. On the supernatural side, we could say is literally God was trying to walk me into. I just couldn't see it at the beginning.
That's fair. Well, as you've transitioned into that, right? Like, what's kind of like, you mentioned a little bit, I think, with the leadership development inside the church being, right, more simple things, right? Of just like identity and who am I? Is it the same in the business world, or is it different, the things that you see when you're coaching folks?
It's the same because it's the human experience. It's the human experience of sin, asking all the same questions. The context is different, right?
Fair.
So we often start off with questions for executives. We'll start off with questions around the business. But as we engage on the spiritual formation side, God will quickly take it to identity, because identity and vision go together. As God gives a greater vision, people can't walk in that vision until God grows their identity in that.
Dang.
And so both happen at once. If I'm working with entrepreneurs and I'm working, let's say, a very simple thing like the business plan, we will pray through the business plan. God will often give them a greater vision for their business. And then fear starts creeping in. What is it? Identity, the imposter syndrome starts creeping. If people really knew who I was, they would know I can't do that. Oh, that's an identity issue. Let's start working on that. Let's identify who gave you a small identity. Let's reject that. Let's ask God who we really are. Now, it's important. I don't give them an identity. I don't tell them who they are.
Sure.
As they engage God, it is a natural thing that God will begin to draw them to them, God's self, help them realize who God is in their life, that how real God is. And then they figure out who they are in that process. And then as they have a greater vision for their business, they have a greater identity to engage it. And that's just true for everybody. Most of the time, we have many people in our church don't do greater things for God because they don't know who they are.
So that's a human, yeah, you said that's a human issue, right?
That's our common human problem.
Yeah. So like when you're helping people, right, like you're helping them discern what is your vision, what is God's call for you, what does the process look like?
So we'll start off with a prayer, a question. We're going to start off with prayer, of course, but we're going to start off with a question. I'm going to ask my client around they have for God. It doesn't matter what the question is. There's no bad question. In the process, we get off track when we're not engaging God. That's when we get off track.
Sure.
And so I was working with a client just recently on her business plan. And the question, I'll keep it very vague. The question was around the business plan. Okay. And we would start off with a centering prayer. It might go like this: Dear Jesus, please show yourself to me. And we want to focus on Jesus. And usually right from the centering prayer, they're not trying to picture Jesus. They're just asking Jesus to remind them of their presence, to see Jesus. One of three things will happen. Either nothing will happen. They'll have some picture of Jesus and will engage, or a block will come up. Now, 80% of the time, a block comes up. What's the block? Fear. That'd be a block. A lie. Who am I to even ask Jesus this question, right? A memory will come up. One time I was talking with a client and we prayed the centering prayer, and I asked them what happened, and they said nothing. I said, come on, tell me what happened. They said, well, it's not relevant. I said, I bet it is. What happened? Well, I remember the time my dad told me I'm worthless. oh,
Mm.
I think that's the block. I think that's Jesus. I think he's just telling us where to start. He's
Mhm.
like, oh, that makes sense. Most of the time, these blocks, people think they're distractions, when in reality, it's a request from God to give over that which holds us back.
That's massive.
So we just start praying through those things. In essence, we're identifying what it is, giving it to God, and saying, what's next?
Mhm.
And all the spiritual directors do is help them in that process.
Mhm. If someone said, hey, I heard about Chuck, this guy, he's an executive coach, I think you should talk to him. And the executive said, well, what's that going to do for me? Right. Like, I'm sure you've had that objection of like, well, what's that going to do? Right. Like, I mean, how's it going to help me? What would be your answer to that question practically to some skeptical executive?
Yes, of course, always. Number one, we're going to drive innovation. Why? God, as the creator, is going to give you creative new ideas to solve problems that go beyond your team or yourself. Number two, you're going to feel closer to God. Most of my clients, if nothing else happened, they feel closer to God, and that brings a peace that sustains them through the craziness of running a company or a corporation. Right?
Sure.
Just the peace alone is like. And three, most executives are right on the edge of burnout. And as we engage in spiritual direction and spiritual formation, then begin to grow. You can't grow spiritually without growing personally. So as they begin to grow both spiritually and personally, they find balance to their life in their context. Someone who runs a company, life is very different than those who are employees.
Sure.
And so we have to contextualize what a balanced life looks like for their situation.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's a good answer. Because then someone can catch a little bit of vision for what they're going to experience, right? Because everybody wants to know, what's the ROI on this? What's this going to bring to my life? How's this going to help me? Have you ever had anybody, an executive, go walk with you, and then at some point just be like, I don't know if this is working. I don't know if this is helping me. I'm confused. And then still continue to go through it?
Yeah, that's not really what happens.
Okay.
What normally happens is they get confronted with what's going on inside of them. Let's just say that picture of their dad calling them worthless so many years ago, and they get scared and run away. Because most people deal with their problems by ignoring them, pushing them down, and running away. And so when they come up, that's the automatic response. Don't worry. We have to face and put into words what we're going to give to God so that we could receive something else. That process scares people, and they'll often run away. Now, it's okay because they're just not ready. And often they come back when they are ready. So it's not a wasted process. But it's not like other coaching where I say something they just don't like, or I give ideas that aren't relevant, because I'm not giving ideas. I'm helping them engage God, who understands their business better than they do. And so, and again, it's not me growing people, it's God growing people. It's me helping people engage God. That's what spiritual directors do. I just do it for executives.
Mm-hmm.
And so normally what happens if they don't run away is they grow spiritually. Sometimes it takes a while. They get on top of their prayer life. They go, Chuck, I think I got it. So I'll reduce it down to maybe once a month, and then eventually on call.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're usually friends for the rest of my life. And they just call me whenever they hit a really rough spot. That's really more likely what happens.
I love it. That's super cool. What you do is super unique and cool. Are there other people doing what you're doing as spiritual director for executives, or are you a unique breed?
I know they're out there. I don't know where they're at.
Okay.
Because I have to imagine, as God led me into it, I have to imagine God's led others into it. A lot of people will say they do what I do, but they're really giving advice. If I give advice from my perspective, it's limited to my perspective. If I help them engage God, and God leads them into something, it's limited to God's perspective. So what perspective do you want? Okay. Now, people might not believe that they can receive from God, right? And then it's just a matter of, well, let's just test and see. That's a common pushback I get. Oh, God doesn't talk to me. All right, well, let's just test it. Let's just test your theory. Free. Well, first session's free. So it's up to you. You tell me what you want.
That's good. So I guess did you, when you made the transition from ministry to executive directing, I think that's probably a better word. Did you get pushback from people in the church that were like, oh, you're going to go try to make money and you're not staying here at the church, which is where you're supposed to be, right? That's real ministry. Did you get that type of feedback?
Yeah, but from very young believers. In the church I was a part of, we had a discipleship strategy where our goal was to help people transition into what we would call world changers. So we come into our faith as skeptics, and we really is to engage our faith in the workplace in such a way we transform culture and we're engaging the world. And so most of the people in the church, they just kind of saw that flow, and it was just time for me to step out. But yeah, there were some going, Chuck, you shouldn't charge money, but they were almost always really young. I don't want to say immature, but they they were early in their faith.
Sure.
A little bit more concrete in their thinking.
Yeah.
You should do this for free. Well, who's gonna? Okay, but
that's not.
How am I gonna get paid?
And like you said, it sounded like, those executives were like, "Of course, I'm gonna pay you. Why would I not pay you?"
Well, it's a budget line item in their company, so
yeah,
it doesn't even come out of their pocket.
Excuse me. What's your faith journey? Like, how did you come into the faith?
Oh, okay. So when I was raised in the mountains of Oregon. So when you think, so the people I was raised with, this beard is not very long. I was raised with loggers. They had long beards and way in the mountains.
Okay.
And my mom was bipolar, and I had a wonderful dad. He was a wonderful man, but my mom was the one staying home with us, and the bipolar really brought a lot of chaos. And it was really actually abusive. All my brothers and sisters are still struggling with our common upbringing. And my mom, without the disease, is a wonderful person. But sometimes it was the bipolar raising us, not my true mom. So I'll just say it that way. But what it did is it destroyed my identity as I was being raised, because I was the one always on the receiving end of "you're worthless." And at 18, I wanted to kill myself. I was not raised in the church. And I was thinking to myself, if this is life, it's not worth living. It's just constantly hating myself, constantly getting beat up. And of course, I'm 18 and I don't know what's out there. I don't know God. I don't really know anything. All I know is my experience, and it was not fun. So what I was going to do, raised in the mountains, I was going to try to drown myself. Now, I don't think you can do that, but in my depressed mind, that was the thought. So it's December 1998, and I drive up to a mountain reservoir higher up in the mountains. It's early in the morning in December. It's cold. There's no snow on the ground, but it is really cold. And I put my feet into this mountain reservoir and they go numb instantly. And I swing my arms back to jump in, and I'm thinking, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to try to swim across it in December. If I chicken out, maybe the cold will take me before I can make it to shore. Again, I didn't think this thing through, but here's where I'm at. So I'm about ready to jump in, and I hear a voice, and the voice says, "Why don't you give me a try?" And I thought someone was standing right behind me. So I turn around and there's no one there. And so I began to just look around, like someone just talked to me. So as I'm looking around, there's no one there. So I begin to call out, "Hello, who's there?" I'm like really embarrassed. Who's watching me do this? Nobody. And it took me like a couple minutes, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's God. And so I was actually really angry. Why is God talking to me now? Why wasn't God talking to me all those nights I cried myself to sleep? All those times I wanted to run away, all those times I'm getting beat up, all those common questions. Why didn't God protect me from my mom? Why did I have to be raised by a bipolar mom? All those questions. And I'm yelling into the air. Okay, God, I'll make you a deal. If you're real, I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll even go to church. I thought that was a big deal. I'll even go to church on Sunday if you just make me happy. Now, before the word happy came out of my mouth, I felt, it was really strange. I felt warm joy, not happiness. And it started in my head and it moved through my body. Now I'm in the mountains, right? My feet are in the reservoir. It's cold. And it just started moving through my body. And it just felt like I could deal with anything. Like I could deal with my mom. It was that quiet strength, and it's hard to describe, but it was like being set back to zero and not being in the negative anymore. I could do this. And I went home and I'm thinking, I gotta find a church. I gotta figure out what just happened. That started my faith journey, and I really realized it started with God just calling me to himself. It was a call, and it was kind of dramatic, and I hope no one has to go to those extremes, because it's kind of rough to have to go to those extremes, but God calls in different ways. He had to call me in a way that I couldn't resist, and I realize it has fueled what I do now, because I just believe God is real, God is tangible, God will lead if you will listen. And I just really put people in positions where we're asking God to lead and discerning how he leads.
Thanks for sharing that. I know that's probably not easy. How did your family react to you being like, well, I believe in God now, I'm going to give my life to God?
We didn't go to church, but they weren't atheists. They had church background, and it was like they were thinking Chuck's getting serious. And in a sense, I didn't care. Like, you come to the end, it's like, I'm not looking back. I'm just going to move forward. Everyone else could figure it out.
Right.
But the strange thing happened after about a year of just going to church. Everyone else started going to church too. They're like, you know what? I'm thinking I'll go to Chuck's church.
Huh. Are they all like, do they all live in that lifestyle now?
They've all scattered throughout the country.
Okay.
And they've all they have all there's healing and there's coping. They've all coped in their own way. And I'm like, I need to heal. I don't want to cope. I don't want to press this down. I need God to heal my past so I can move on to a greater future. And it's the better way to go.
100%. What would you say from your own experience? What would you say to others that are maybe in that place, right, where you were at with your feet in the water? What would you say to those people if maybe they don't have an audible voice or the experience that you have or had?
So I would tell them what I tell everybody. Hey, let's try. Let's ask. I needed an audible voice because I was so broken. Most people aren't that broken. And God knows how to speak to everybody in a way that they can receive. But I'll often start out a session, if you can hear, let's say, Jesus as clearly as you can hear me, what would you ask him? And that question throws them off, because I don't think anyone has ever asked them that question, but that's kind of the goal. That speaks to a level of connection they didn't think possible. But if I read the Gospels right, it's a level of connection God wants with us. My sheep hear my voice. God led David to become a monarch, to have influence. Now, he didn't do everything perfect, but still God led every step of the way. And so if he led David, and if he wants that level of intimacy, why can't God engage me? So usually what I'll do with those people, and it'll be usually more of a church context. So let's just try it. Let's just pray. Let's just see what happens. Usually God comes through because God loves the person, especially when they're earnestly seeking him.
That's a good answer. Right. I think you're right. What you said there about a lot of people just don't have a paradigm for understanding that God is real, here, and listening. So when you ask that question, it's probably like, I don't even have a paradigm to think in that fashion. Right.
Yeah. I don't even know what I'm going to ask him. Well, let's just take a moment and think. And I'll usually tell people have one of three kinds of questions. Why did this happen to me kind of question? It's an honest question. What do you want me to do, or who do you want me to be, or where are we going? Usually when I kind of lay it out, they're like, oh, it's the why did this have to happen? Oh, let's just ask. And again, the question doesn't matter what the question is. It matters who we're talking to.
Right.
Because if we got the wrong question, but we're talking to the right God, he's going to fix the question.
That's really good. That's really good. Do you ever find that maybe that's not the right question. Do you ever miss being in the vocational church ministry, or are you just convinced that this is where God has you? Because I know some people leave ministry and then they're like, I miss being in the local church.
So to answer your question straight, yes, being a pastor was my life goal from the reservoir on.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Like, hey, if this is God, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Right. And for 20 years, God really had to pull me out of ministry, give me a larger vision. Right. Because again, my identity was formed by the church or local impact. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. Now I have national impact. So I work with leaders all across the United States. And I'm not their pastor. I'm their coach and I'm their spiritual director. They need a pastor. Usually people say, you're pastoring people. No, they need a local pastor.
Sure.
I'm their coach and spiritual director. We should work tandem, right? And but right now I'm in a church plant and I'm part of the leadership team. I'm preaching tomorrow. It's not like I don't have an avenue to serve, but it really is serving underneath the senior pastor in a very limited capacity and helping when it's appropriate and not leading the charge anymore.
Got it. Okay. Well, do you ever run into executives that have a local pastor who aren't happy that they're also working with you?
What I find is if an executive has a solid pastor, there is avenues in the church to do what I do. Maybe not in the way I do it, but usually an exec can call up the pastor and get an appointment or an elder, or there's a men's group. What I find, and this is true for spiritual directors, Christian spiritual directors in general, is a lot of times we get people who are estranged from the church, who are, pre-Christian, we could say it that way. They're open to spiritual things, or they were in the church when they were young, but they built their career and the church wasn't relevant to their career, i.e. no one had just made those connections with them. And they hadn't been to church for 20 years. And I'll give you a try, Chuck, so they're open. So I'm really catching people on the fringe. A lot of times churches can be very hard on executives who have to make big money. And if they're in a church that has a negative view of money, then they kind of just fall away. Like, I'm sorry, I have to pay my employees. I have to make money. And they do. They have to make money.
Yep.
And we pray about money a lot.
Good.
And money is not the answer to everything. Money is what God gives us to help us achieve our call. Do you know what your call is? Let's figure out our call. Let's ask for money.
That's good. Wait, do you see, because you're interfacing with people in an industry, Do you see trends that God is doing in the marketplace when you're talking to multiple executives and you're like, are you able to identify trends that God is doing through these people in the marketplace?
Yeah. So there's a flow with people who have some kind of faith tradition where they'll spend their life building their career, and they've built a business, and businesses come and go, and they'll want to have um a deeper spiritual impact through their vocation.
Hmm.
And so right now what is big is social entrepreneurship. And it's the Christians who've kind of been doing this all along, really ever since the first century.
Hmm.
And what we have seen just kind of nationally, and again, this is a movement of God, is when the execs hit a point when they want a bigger impact than just their organization, and they have a spiritual bent, social entrepreneurship is the avenue that they begin to engage their faith in new and creative ways.
Hmm.
So right now what we're seeing is executives who have a business background engage social issues for the glory of God, but in new ways.
Hmm.
And that really is exciting. And that's a big part of my work too, is praying through, well, when you have an exec who has a background in business, and we begin to pray through what is his or her calling, the outcome is going to be a social engagement.
Hmm.
Right? Because our goal really is to, in businesses, if you can influence or transform culture, you're an influential business. You're going to make money.
Yeah.
But in our calling, we're going to do that for the glory of God. We're going to do that for the benefit of people and for the glory of God. And it hits all 3 points. You're going to make more money because you're going to be influential, but you're going to help people, and you're going to do it in a way that glorifies God.
Mm-hmm.
But every industry is going to do it in such a unique way. You can't just read a book and say, I'm going to reproduce what that guy did. It worked for him in his context. It's not going to work for you in your context, which is why I argue we just need to engage God and have him show us how we're going to do it in our context. So again, we're driving innovation. We can't ride off the successes of the past. We have to find new models, and they're out there. And to me, that's the exciting part. Again, this is about, I say this a lot, driving innovation means we have to go to the creator God, who's the inventor of innovation itself. God, who is a creator at his heart, will work in us and through us to continue the creative process in and through our industries. You're going to come up with truly unique ideas that no one else is doing when we engage God in this process. God drives innovation.
That's good. The ultimate creator, the ultimate innovator. I love that. I think because for me, right, I've always seen business and entrepreneurship as an art in itself anyways, right? Like it's a creative process. I don't think I think it hasn't been given the credit it's due from a creative standpoint, right? Like building a business is an art. It's a creative process, right? It's ebbs and flows, and this works and this doesn't work, and this doesn't blend together and this does blend together. And I just think we've done a disservice. Also, you mentioned something earlier that I would love to click back on, the view of money, right? Like you work with people that have a lot of money. What is the church getting wrong as a whole, right? Like not maybe to call specific things out, but I think as a whole, there's a struggle with money in the American church, right? Like it's like, oh, money, you can't, God wants you to be humble, and that doesn't involve money. What would you say to that?
I mean, I think I would say the same thing you're saying. The church, and I don't want to beat the church up. I love the church.
No, I do
The
too.
church is the body of Christ. But many churches will just have a view of money that makes it the problem. The problem is we don't have enough money. The problem is people are greedy for money. The problem is they don't trust God for money, instead of learning how to generate money. And then I think it's driven from two things. The church tends to focus on the poor, and that's a good thing. But the poor tend to have a different view of money than business owners. The poor will tend to view money in terms of a value, whereas business owners will tend to view money as a resource. So it's good or it's bad, or it's something I'm going to leverage to accomplish a goal. Okay. The other thing is, I think a lot of church traditions, the institutional structure puts a negative value on money. And being someone who was a pastor for 20 years, it was something I would fight. It's like, why do we keep ending up in this place where money is bad? When I started working with executives, money's really not the issue, and they have to bring in millions and hundreds of millions.
Sure.
Why? To pay their employees. Why? To give them benefits. Why? To grow the business, right? Yeah, but they make so much money. So what? They take that money and they hire people.
Right.
And then they get beat up because they don't pay their people enough money. Well, that means they need to make more money so they could pay their people more money, right?
Right.
I know I could probably there's probably books out there that give much deeper answers. I'm really just kind of focused on the observation and helping people really see, and executives don't struggle with this, but it's other people who do. Money really is what God's going to give us to grow and move towards our call. Our key issue, most people, they don't know what they're called to do. So let's walk this through real quick. We're called to Jesus, first of all. Then we're called to be transformed. That's the growth part. He needs to grow us. Then we're called to mission. And that's where mission is where we're engaging our vocation. So I'm talking about this third place of calling. When we have a sense of mission, how we're going to engage mission through for-profit enterprise, God's going to provide you money as you're moving in that direction. Most people don't, well, they're not dedicated to mission. And if they were, they don't know what it is, but they still expect God to fund them, right? No, let's figure out our call. Let's walk through this process, get to know Jesus, grow in Jesus. Let's go represent Jesus. He's going to call you in a particular area to represent Jesus. Now let's pray for money to move in that direction. And if that means you have to start a business to do it, let's ask God for the money and he will lead you to it. You want to make money. God will show you how to make money, but he's going to show you how to spend it too. It's not going to stay in your pocket very long. Sure. He's going to give it to you to invest, to grow, and it's going to grow your influence again, and he's going to leverage your influence for his glory. And he's going to do it through industry. And so what's your call? Most people don't know. And most churches aren't, I'll be honest, most churches that I'm aware of, there's good ones out there, but the ones I was involved with aren't helping people identify their unique impact in the culture.
That's good. How do we fix that?
I think I'm seeing a movement of business leaders just all across the country saying, I'm just going to figure this out. And so I think a coach like me is one avenue. I have seen God raise up ministries and churches. I've seen ministries where they're actually helping. The ministry is to help people grow their business. I've seen other coaches try to figure this out. A lot of times I'll be training other coaches in how to integrate Christian spiritual direction into their practice as they coach them through, let's say, marketing or something like that. Let's pray through some of these issues. I think God is doing this, and it's a matter of just identify what God is doing and then kind of partnering with it. But we Christians have kind of lost our cultural influence, and now we need to own that, just recognize it, and begin to come up with innovative and new strategies for being influential again, of which I'm just one part of it. And there are other really unique ways that other churches and individuals and ministries are doing to recapture that cultural influence.
I think that's right. What you said is spot on. Recapturing the cultural influence through industry and obviously a variety of other areas. That's great. Chuck, you're an incredibly humble guy. I really appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And thanks for what you're doing. I think right? Being also in business myself and obviously having, things that I think God is calling me to. It's very encouraging to know people like you that are actually out there helping leaders who are shaping culture, right? And shaping the industries. It's just cool to have people like you out there doing what you're doing. Thanks for doing it.
My pleasure.
Absolutely, brother. Well, thanks again, man. I appreciate you. Is there any last words you would give to folks? Just words of encouragement. It doesn't have to be business specific.
Number one, God is real, more real than you think.
Hmm.
God will lead you. Our biggest challenge is to continue to seek and pursue. Jesus says, ask, seek, and knock. And that's our challenge, is to figure out how to ask, seek, and knock in our particular time and place, and not give up.
That's great. Ask, seek, and knock. Don't give up. That's great. Thanks again, Chuck. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. God bless.
God bless.